And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up For What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles, episode 153. We're here, and I don't know if we've quite hit rock bottom yet, but Sunday was an incredibly low moment, unwatchable, incomprehensible how bad this has got at this stage of the season. But to try and talk us through it, and if you are listening, if you're still sticking with us, then good on you, because it ain't been so easy. But we've got YouTube's finest, Mr. 713, Ruben Gamis, joined us. Ruben, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you for having us back. And if you are listening, shout out to you because at this point you are the real fans, man. It is rough, right? You talk about rock bottom. I was at the game yesterday. We were booing the first offensive drive, the first three and out. The boos immediately came out. The
Yeah.
vibe wasn't there whatsoever at all. For every fan, you saw two empty seats right next to him. It was a Commanders home game, really, and it just goes to show that this season is just horrible, man. It sucks to come out here to even make videos about them because the culture is losing right now.
Yeah, and they obviously you talked about rock bottom a lot. And when would you hit it? Was it the day you traded Deshaun? Would it be the day you potentially played Deshaun at his new spot? Would it, when would it be? And I think it's still got the potential to be, that December 4th game against the Browns. But certainly, I think whatever happens for the rest of the season, I certainly came into today when I was making some notes, Ruben, just to. I think really it's indisputable now, and a lot can change, and the league never fails to fascinate you how quickly things can change. And things can swing for you and against you in very, very, very quick succession. But I think the Texans right now are in a league of their own below every other team, and I don't think it's even close.
No, it is that bad. I'm a very optimistic person, right? That's how I want to live, my life just in general. And I was looking forward to the progression of the second year players, Mills, Collins, Brevin Jordan, Lopez Wallow, and then looking, to see, how much of these rookies stand out. And you could say from this young core that we have, it has regressed. And that was the only thing that we were looking forward this season. We knew we weren't going to be successful at all. I was saying 5 to 7 wins, but make those, 5 to 7 wins competitive. And when you see, the quarterback position, when you see the other young talent regress, and even this rookie class, it is rock bottom for me because it shows that this coaching staff has failed them. It shows that there's no type of accountability within this team. And man, I've been watching this team since I was a little kid. This hurts me on a personal level to see these, just get their ass physically handed to them yesterday by the Commanders. For me, it was rock bottom, man, as a lifetime fan, and hopefully it gets better.
Yeah, and I think that's right because, like this, as you said, this season was only ever going to be about young guys progression, year
And
two
that's
and
all it
year one
was.
guys. Yeah,
Can Davis Mills show that he could potentially start in year three? Maybe you don't take a quarterback with, like what's your first pick, but now you have to, right? I
yeah,
put it
yeah,
out
yeah.
yesterday that he outplayed himself out of a starting role for the Houston Texans. I mean, with that being said, if they don't take a quarterback next year and they go Will Anderson and Jalen Carter or like mix those two around, I wouldn't mind that whatsoever. But you have to have an answer for the QB position, man. And
Yeah,
I was the biggest Davis Mills supporter, really. And now
yeah,
I have to eat crow and say that, this guy it's not it. You have -1 passing yards at the half. I think last week it was -8 or -17. I'm not sure, but how are you going to evaluate your team when your passing offense is putting up that, like that amount of numbers? The regression is there. We gave him so much credit for for progressing in his rookie season. I'm talking about Davis Mills, right? His last couple games at home, 10 touchdowns, 1 interception. He had the quote unquote best deep ball out of any QBs, right? And we haven't seen that this year. We've seen him get worse We were so hyped for Pep Hamilton. I was calling him a potential head coach candidate for the future. He hasn't showed me anything. People are saying Tim Kelly is better. It's just been that bad, man.
Yeah.
In terms of this coaching staff that you had faith in, right? Lovey Smith, you've been to a Super Bowl as a head coach, as a coordinator. And in his press conference yesterday, that argument with the fan where he was like, make a change for what? It's just frustrating to see, man.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to go on a rant, bro,
No,
but it's
yeah, that's just what this is for.
frustrating.
I think this is probably a good.
It's just frustrating to watch.
Yeah, I've just become apathetic towards the whole thing. I think this year more than any, and I think because I didn't expect much from Pep Hamilton. Because I'd watched his offense in the past, I didn't expect much from Davis Mills because I think there was clear circumstances of why he played well in those games. Charger COVID call offs. Any good defense he played against, he didn't do well. Now, look, I didn't think he'd be this bad this year. I didn't think he'd be good. I think he'd prove us that he could. I thought at best case there could be a question about whether he could be a starter. I don't think there's any question about it now. I think it's so clearly sealed, and it was quite clearly sealed. And I think there's a lot of there's a lot of issues on it, and we'll come back to some of those debates and stuff we picked up on definitely. But just you touched on the Lovey's presser there. I didn't think it was that fractious. I don't think it was necessarily that confrontational. When you go back, I remember B.O.B. at Pittsburgh when they blew the game. I think that was when Arian Foster was still there, so that would have been 2014. And the team was, relatively good at that point. I remember, that's not my job comment, and it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
Brian. All these kind of stuff. I didn't think it was that bad, and I think it's a good thing as well because I think it has to. I think tensions that are underlying with the media, who are a channel by fans to get information back and forth and so forth, and that's how the whole business is supported, due to fan interest. But when things are that bad and you drive the fans away, and there is no fan interest. That must rub off on people when you go to do this as a job. I just do this as a hobby. I live, in a different continent. I've watched this team for 10 years, and I don't think it's ever been as low as this in the last decade. I don't think it's debatable, actually. Last season you could write off. I think, but when you get into the third successive season of being, abjectly terrible on so many levels and just a chronically flawed football team with very, very few talent, if any talent at all, we'll come on to that. I think it's tough. So that I think the fact that it's coming ahead is a good thing because it brings out the open. It makes it clear. Some people can delude themselves if they like, and you can call it positive, you can call it negative, you can call it whatever it is. But ultimately, the tape's out there. This team's a bad football team. Doesn't have many players. The young players you've picked aren't very good, or certainly struggling within the conditions that they're in. It's a tough ask for everybody. Coaching staff, second rate to third rate. All this stuff. There's so many factors that are going against the positive or the forward direction of progress for a football team. And you get a position where you just can't win a game, and the scoreboard doesn't necessarily show the differential between the two teams. But they've done a miraculous job at keeping the record books when you look back on it, as actually these games have been not that far apart, but they've not been in any of these games at all this year, probably apart from week one. And obviously the solitary one in Jacksonville, which was a bit of a funny game. Anyway, lots of turnovers, red zone interceptions, etc. So, yeah, I think Lovey was a good point of it bubbling up to the surface. What did you make of the whole thing? I kind of thought it was a little bit overblown, but
Yeah, I mean, like, I didn't think it was bad in terms of him snapping on him. I just think on account of what he said, it just shows that, he knows this is a bad football team. When the reporter asked, like, why didn't you put your best product on the field? And he was like, because I didn't feel like I had to, you're kind of like, well, why not? Right. And then later, the reporter asked about making a change, and then Lovey responded like, well, make a change for what? So, to me, like that kind of shows us like, you're okay with being this mediocre. You're okay with getting, manhandled at home because you still have to evaluate the football team at the end of the day. And if you have a QB who's negative on passing yards at the half, how are you evaluating these wide receivers? Right? Because as much, grind that we want to give, the offensive line, like for not being that good, sometimes Davis Mills is just not putting the ball in the right spots, overthrowing the 6'4". Nico Collins are underthrowing him. I think now you need to start evaluating the team and who's worthy enough. I mean, worthy enough, right? To be here for the next season, and whether that's throwing Kyle Allen out there.
Mm.
I don't even know, but you need to make a change at this point.
Yeah, I think and again, it just goes back to that point where it's so intertwined and deep rooted because like you sign like guys like Eno Benjamin, you sign, pick up a Rogers on waiver wire, and yeah, these are the kind of moves you want to be making. You want to be kicking the tires on as many guys as possible, using that first overall or first pick of the waiver wire at this stage, to do that. But I've got no confidence in this offensive coaching staff incorporate these players. You had Tyrone Johnson, you had the other Johnson, I forgot his first name now, from Tampa Bay. There was the guy from Minnesota, former fifth round pick. Neither of those guys were included in the offense, cut, let go. And you never really saw much packages for them, if any. They were out there potentially on running. I think both of them rotated in a lot on running downs, and that's you're not going to see what what they potentially got in Tyron, who was here before. Let go a number of times. It's the third time he's been released by his team, so doubt he'll want to come back unless he has no choice. Then it's just I've got no faith at Pep and the system and how boring it is to watch. And like you said, I think there's a legitimate argument that despite that system, from the Bill O'Brien hand me down to Tim Kelly, was hellishly frustrating at times, it wasn't as bad as this. And I think then you've got Mills, who's just not playing well, as you said, landing balls up the sideline, hitting the paint, not even a chance for the receiver to come down with it. I think, I just don't see how we're going to move forward with, because I don't think that anybody can question at this stage, is Mills play good enough to be still the starter? Absolutely not. It just cannot be the case. So do you go to Kyle Allen? Does that give you a better chance to get a look at some of these guys? Maybe. I don't know. But it's just a kind of sorry mix of a terrible, collection of lack of talent, limited coaching staff, inability to change, inability to script plays. The fact you go 3 and out 2 weeks in a row, 3 times in 2 games, you just can't. That cannot be accepted. And I think probably the overall point is, Ruben, and there's been lots of kind of stuff about that we're the last 2 coaches on Casseri, and we'll come on to him because I think he's not in the crosshairs enough right now. But how long do you think ownership continues to accept this? Because ultimately, right, this doesn't really matter what you and I think. It doesn't really matter what, a lot of people kind of have their opinion on this. Ultimately, this is a business. It needs income. And if the stands are, I know a lot of these seats are filled, but, the game day income will be down, merchandise, beers, food sales, all that kind of stuff. It all takes a hit with this kind of stuff. Where do you think this leaves ownership? Do you think, how much more of this will they stomach?
Look, I definitely think maybe this offseason we see like a little bit more pressure. Maybe we might see like like Lovie Smith as another one and done coach for us. But at this point, you haven't been successful in a number of years now. You have to start winning football games. This isn't the legacy that like Bob McNair left, right? He was a guy who demanded, a winning football team. We haven't seen that since. It does look like Cow is caring now, right? He was grilling burgers for us like not too long ago. And I'm pretty sure he sees the product now and knows like no one is believing in this Houston Texans team, not even the fans, right? And Houston Texans fans are one of the most loyal out there. And the fact that no one is at the game, you're getting booed instantly as soon as this offense goes threes and out. It's telling. I really hope that that he puts pressure to find another head coach. Look at the head coaches that we let go. Brian Dabo is being very successful right now. Robert Saleh is being very successful right now. Jonathan Gannon, is having the Philadelphia Eagles offense, right? I definitely wanted him, but we chose not to, make a decision quick, and we held our tongue and we held our hands under our eyes. And now we're in this situation of a 1-8-1 football team, and you kind of have to make that, decision. I don't think this city could take another losing season like this because you're not even competitive at this point. You're getting outplayed, outcoached, out manhandled every single game.
Yeah, and I think that's it, isn't it? Because there's only so many holes that you can attack every off season. the money or the effective cap space that you'll have will be limited this year because, like, there's just not a huge amount of space. We're not going to, we're not going to be sitting with 60 million going into free agency by the time you assign a proportion for your draft class, your futures contracts and all that kind of stuff. It all adds up and it swallows that number up. We've got a low number of players under contract this year, so I think it keeps saying people think we're going to be spending or think we have a lot of money, but actually, by the time it comes to it, we're going to have no carryover because we've spanked money on terrible players again this year, and for a predetermined result, I would have suggested prior to signing a lot of these guys back. So, we've spent a lot of money on these these last 2 years on these like middle of the road
On these
free agents.
culture
Yeah,
mediocre
yeah,
guys,
like
right?
D level
You pay
players.
Brandon
Yeah,
Cooks,
yeah,
he quits. You bring back Kamir Grugier-Hill, he quits on you, asks for his release, right? You bring back Kirksey, he hasn't really done nothing all season. These culture guys that you brought in are either quitting or are not playing well enough to earn that money. So it's like, what is going on here? And I don't want to question Nick Casario, right now, but
yeah.
I am starting to have some, right? I
Well, no,
put
I
out
think
a
we should.
tweet.
No, I think it's a good debate, Ruben. Honestly, I
Okay.
do. I think it's. Well, yeah, we'll get. What are your big questions for Cassari? And we'll take it from there.
So, like, the biggest question, right, going back to these culture guys, Justin Britt was a culture guy, and it only took one game from us to understand that he should not be playing in the NFL. You haven't found a backup running back for Damian Pierce, right? You keep on, using Rex Burkhead. Why? There's no reason why he should be on this team. But this is another culture guy that you brought back to help this young team. These culture guys are not good, man. And, they're only hurting you because you are giving them money. And they're veterans, right? They're not young, right? They're not 24, 25. They're in their 27, 28s, and 29s. And it's like these guys that you brought in to help the team, they've either quit or just suck, or they just suck to where none of these young guys are gonna pay attention to them. Like, am I gonna listen to Carmen Bucher? He'll coach me? Absolutely not. Am I gonna listen to Brandon Cooks coach me after he quit on me? Absolutely not. And then for Lovie Smith, there's no accountability. Have we once heard him, say my
Mm.
quarterback needs to play better? I need to coach better. We haven't heard that whatsoever at all, and it's kind
Yeah,
of frustrating.
I think with Lovey on his media availability today, as of Monday, we're recording right now. He did say, like ultimately, it's you got to coach better. You got to get the players to play better, but he also recognised and acknowledged the lack of talent, and I think there is an element of that, but as I said, that's only going to change so quickly. And we'll come back to Casero very quickly, but I think that the point for me is that there's only so many holes, there's only so many draft picks you can have, there's only so many rookies you can play at one time, there's only much you can spend on free agency, there's only so many times you're going to get right at free agency, which Casero's not done, and I think that's the biggest criticism. Free agency has just not been there, cap management not been there, and those two things go hand in hand. But I don't think he's got a choice after the way this team's played at times to, well, if he wants to get better, I think we have to move on from this coaching staff on both sides of the ball, or certainly hire new coordinators and some new position coaches and have a reasonably 40% plus overhaul of the coaching staff, because ultimately, are we getting everything out of the coaches? Are the coaches getting everything out of those guys of the limited talent we have? The answer is definitely no. I don't think anybody can dispute that, and it's going to take time to get there. So I don't know who the best candidate is. I genuinely have no clue. You need to find the best leader of men on the other side, on both sides of the ball, to go and bring in a scheme that's more interesting than what we're watching. And I think that's the thing. I love his schemes outdated. Pep's shown his ceiling as a play caller. I think Lovey's shown his ceiling. He's a defensive coordinator at best. And I would argue, Ruben, I would say, based on everything to date, from the botching of the Cooks potential trade, because you could have got a second, I think you'll regret that, for the management of the cap, for the lack of free agency signings, or the choice of the allocation of your resources into free agency, wasting money on second, third rate guys at best. I think Caserio's potentially on the hook there this season. He's going to have to make significant changes to show that he's going to change the direction of the team, because I think his input, okay, everybody's so quick to make excuses and give the context and all that kind of stuff, and that's great. But ultimately, and I asked somebody this, Ruben, I'll ask you: could you name one part of this team that has definitively moved from A to B that Caserio's improved since he's been here?
I mean, no, not really. I mean, if you want to
I
give the
think that
running,
says it all. It's 2 years. If the answer is no, if there's no clear answer to that, then
yeah, there's not
I
a
think
a
yeah, I think he's got
definitive
to be on his
answer.
last stand.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, I guess I'll say it now. I was gonna drop a video and say that for me next year, this is the hot seat for Nick Casario. You've now had two drafts to prove that you're gonna put us on the right track. And if you have the number one overall pick and you have another potentially top five, top 10 pick, you can't mess it up. You have to select the right
Yeah.
coach, and you need to at least be competitive next offseason, right? You also have, I think, about $100 million worth of cap, like to mess with.
Well, that's the fallacy. I think somebody put that out there, and that's not true. I think it's we've got 40 odd million, but we've got less than 40 players on the books for that number. So there's going to have to be a lot of movement on it. But if I was to ask you, if the number one overall pick or the second overall pick looks like, a less brutal version of how Kenyon Green's performed with the 15th overall pick, put the coaching staff to aside 1 minute. If that's the case, and that number one pick isn't from day one, or by midpoint of the season, or just over halfway through the point of the season, if that high pick isn't looking like a game changer for you every week, or at least has the potential to do you think you still got a job?
Someone like Kenyon Green, like yes, because he's still very young. Lerman Tunsil did have a not so good rookie season. We Kenyon Green isn't, making himself like he's not doing himself any favors. He's looked horrible as of, like the past couple weeks. But at this point, like you have to start demanding something from your players. So next year, hopefully, like that's another conversation to have if he
Yeah.
does,
So like
like regress.
if that pick is like similarly ineffective on a lesser scale, say the first overall pick's the most valuable asset you can have, 15th overall pick, pretty good. If that first overall pick is struggling in the same way, maybe not to the same brutal degrees he did yesterday or the last 4 weeks, but I think Caserio's I think there's got to be questions about his job, because ultimately,
No,
even
100%.
even if he got all these picks and hit with every single one, I would argue that's probably still not enough to make us a competitive football team. So, like, I think the fact that he's not hitting on them, I think compounds the focus on him.
Yeah, no, like 100%, right? You look at his like from his first draft class, Davis Mills has gotten worse. Nico Collins, you could say there is something there. Brevin Jordan, we haven't seen him on season. Garrett Wallow hasn't done enough to get any PT. Lopez regressed, and even this year, right from Jaden Petrie had a horrible game last week. Uh, I do think that not only does he need to have a solid draft, he also needs to bring in solid, players during free agency, with that 44 mil, as long with the right coaching staff, right? Because he hasn't done nothing good so far. And it sucks to say that, going into year three, with Nick Casario, but this is your second head coach. And you once again are flirting with winning less than 5 games in the season.
Yeah, and I think that's the trouble, isn't it? Because it's like they're definitely not going to win five, definitely not going to win four. I'd be absolutely shocked if they won 2 games. You can always win a game here, but I think I struggle not to see any route to them not having the first overall pick. I think we're in this kind of interesting spot where you've got the Panthers and the Steelers both sorry, no,
3-7.
the Bears and the Panthers are 3-8. Then you've got another batch of 6 teams: the Steelers, the Rams, the Raiders, the Jags, the Broncos, the Browns, all at 3-7. Not a bye week yet. Or
Yeah, a lot
sorry,
of 3-win teams out
or
there.
the other two ones haven't had a bye week yet, rather. So like it's one of those things. It's like we're in that position. I don't think we're good enough to play our way out of that top pick. But I think when
Man,
you
I'll be so mad if
yeah.
Nick Casario
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
come
no, I
back.
think so. But I think it's almost like I think having that top pick in some ways puts Casario on in the crosshairs even more because
100%.
depending on what you're going to do with that pick, you have to decide what you're going to do with your coaching staff. And if you're going to take a quarterback, then you can't keep this coaching staff because that's just not an option. So if you just say if you put the coaching staff aside because that'll sort itself out, and I think it will definitely be changed and tried to improve. But I think whatever he does with that pick, there's going to be so much focus on that based on the fact that you're not using Stingley in the right to accentuate his strengths. Kenyon Green's certainly struggling, and I think he was always going after missing so much time in training camp. So, you know, you start to when you're in year two of a 3 year suite of picks for the trade of a franchise quarterback. Things have got to start to look a lot rosier very quickly. But I think this first overall pick is going to put him so much in the focus, and I think that I suppose there's two schools of thought, Ruben. Which one do you sit in? Do you pass? Because there's unless you're absolutely 100% generational talent sold, and if not, I suppose there's three scenarios. So do you pass it and take a defensive player or the best player available, regardless of position, or do you? I mean, I think the ideal one for me is you trade back because even all these picks for Watson, these three first round picks and a couple of change wasn't going to be enough to transform this team in the way it needs to be. So, I think potentially Casario's hope is that he gets out of the top pick with a ransom to then give him a chance to draft players into this team. But what kind of do you sit in the camp of build and wait, or do you say if the guy's there, take him?
I mean, it's kind of hard not to say, don't draft a QB next year, especially knowing that Caleb Williams is coming out next year. But I think with the way that that Davis Mills has played as of late this whole season, like you might have to take Bryce Young at number one overall. Um, he just looks very good. His arm is just above average. He's able to move in the pocket. The size is his size is a little bit of an issue. But if they traded back, like I wouldn't mind that whatsoever. Like you said, there's too many holes on this team for a quarterback just to fix, right? The offensive line itself has three holes. You need a center, you need a right guard, you need a right tackle, and I've seen this team with a good quarterback in a horrible, surrounding cast. Right, that was Deshaun Watson. Remember when he, acquired for I think it was 70 something percent of our offense by himself, and the terrain, and the team surrounding him was just garbage. I like the idea of trading back and getting a Jalen Carter, getting a Will Anderson, and beefing up this defense, and maybe taking a chance on a QB later, but I think at this point, if you're Nick Casario, I think you might be pressured to take Bryce number one overall with the recent, success you haven't had.
Yeah, no, and I think that's it. They may come from ownership. I think there's definitely plenty of people out there that are happy to state that the last two coaches were given to Nick Casario, rather than him wholly picking them on their own merit or in the absence of a kind of PR storm crisis. So yeah, I think the best. I think there's just so many holes. To think this team's even going to be good in 2 years' time, I think it's a stretch right now. How we sit today, and as I said, a lot can change, and it changes quickly, and it always surprises you how quickly it'll change. But I think there's just so many holes to fill, and I think the trading back, you almost want to do that 2 years in a row. I think that's how low this baseline talent is, and our record shows. Your record shows what you are, and I think we're definitely miles away where we need to be in terms of that sort of talent, baseline level across the roster. And then you've got to try and augment that with guys who can actually lead but also be good football players at the same time. And I think we're really struggling with that. So I think Casario, is he in the firing line? Not yet, but I think he should be. And I don't know what it'll take to be. And I think people have. I think he was the white knight when he to bring us out of this terrible thing, but he's certainly not been that. I don't think there's an objective argument beyond. I hope his draft class works out because even his first draft class, you got to remember he spent the most ever draft capital to trade up
Hmm.
ever in that round to get Nico Collins. So he spent from future years to get Nico, and he's the only one that looks serviceable as a long term start. Brevin Jordan inactive, and I think the fact is there is no point talking about Sunday's game. That's how bad things are right now. And if that's if that is the case, the GM has to take some flack. It has to be, oh, you set, I can't I can't fathom a situation where he gets to hire a fourth coach. So if he's going to hire a third, is now the right time? You'd argue probably not. So you probably want to sit with Lovey and make some changes. But then what do you do at quarterback? And I think that's the big issue. And when you're not wholly endowed with a huge amount of cap space, to try and bring a vet in is going to swallow up a big amount of that when you've got so many holes, but it's not a long-term issue. So look, nobody is making excuses for the situation we find ourselves in. There is so many problems, and there's so many holes, on every level. But I just don't know how he fixes it, and it may be unfixable. It may take a whole, 3 to 4 year cycle of just trying to get some parity, and then you got to hit luck at that point. And I don't know. I mean, how long do you think this feasibly takes? And what would your sort of 2 or 3 first steps be to actually get this actually looking like progress? Because it's been regression all round this year.
Realistically, 3 to 4 years,
Yeah,
right? If you tell me, if Nick Casario goes out here and says Davis Mills is going to be our starting quarterback next year, the only way I am buying that is if you use that $44 million that we have that you let me know, not a million, and you sign some of the best, offensive linemen out there, young, they're 26, 27, because you can't go into next year with the same offensive line. Um, you you kind of have to force to make a coaching change at this point, like I said. So, and it sucks to say that because like I was a very good fan of Lovey at the very beginning of the season, but the way we're losing these games and the way he's kind of handling himself, you kind of have to make a change at this point. But if you're not going to take a quarterback at number one overall, then you got to vest around Davis Mills. And that's
yeah,
what we have to see. Then I could kind of buy into
yeah.
okay, give him a 3 year. That's 100% okay. He is still a young quarterback. I understand that the team all around him was horrible. I'll buy that. But you need to start investing into the team.
Yeah, and I think the problem is though you've got kind of like two guys on the bookend who are probably your best part of the line. You're going to have to pay or trade one. You're not going to be able to keep both of them for more than 2 to 3 years, just in terms of the value that they're going to command. So you're potentially looking at more spots. You can invest in the offensive line, but really, I mean, when you're playing with 3 first round picks on the line, I don't know how much more you can feasibly invest. We're already paying, the line as a whole, and Tunsil's contract's huge. So like I don't know if the offensive line fixes it. I think you want to build a strength. I do agree with that premise. You put strength on strength, and potentially, but ultimately, the free agent class of interior guys, this year does not look good. Just to clarify, before anybody messes, it's 48.1 million is the space, but only 39 players under contract for next year. So you got to get
I don't
40.
know, man.
So you got to fill that up to 51 under the cap, as the rules say. That's according to overthecap.com. So I think there's so many issues here, but so I mean, for me, I think you've just got to affect. I think that for me, priority number one is just defend the run and get guys who can go and actually defend the run, because that's just killed every game. And I think until
Oh
we
yeah,
do that,
that guy who was torching us yesterday, De'Aaron Payne. He's a free agent. 25 years old. I was
yeah,
looking at the tackles today. Hargrave, the guy from the Eagles, number 97. He is
yeah,
29, but a
these are guys are going to get priced out of our
free
market. I
agent.
think that's the issue. So there'll be more bargain basement shopping. I think, and that's the thing when you're shopping in these, in the Goodwill store, you might find a couple of Stephen Nelsons or Desmond Kings, but you you need 10 of them. So I don't know how quickly it's going to go, and I'm sick of this shit, to be honest, Ruben. It's been tough this
No,
year.
no, like it's sad to see, right? Because you're so used to the JJ Watt days where you were excited about Sundays, right? You knew that this defense was going to give it all, that this crowd was going to give it its all, and just to see the slippery slope from being 24 up on the Super Bowl champs, it's been absolutely crazy. Like I hope there's a 30-30, like about this down the line about the collapse of the Houston Texans of what could have been. But
Mm,
to me, this is rock bottom, right? Because when you had Deshaun Watson, it wasn't a matter of if he was going to win you a Super Bowl, it was a matter of when. And to go from that, all the drama going around, Bill O'Brien basically being God at NRG, just normal stuff that people wouldn't do, the Houston Texans were doing, outsmarting themselves. And you are what you are now. You're 1-8-1 football team, probably the worst team in the NFL. And you're going into the offseason, like we both discussed, needing damn near everything.
yeah, that's it. I think you just got. I think they've just got to shore up both the lines. I think defend the run, keep a solid level of pass protection, and hope that you can find enough guys on key positions. But I think it's just there's so I think when you look at the path forward of young guys, when you had Stingley injured yesterday, I don't think there's any huge concerns about him, but you're certainly not going to get the best out in the system. He's your number one asset. You potentially take another number one asset as a quarterback, and this system's not right for either of those guys. So when you think of it that way, you think, well, actually, you're probably going to have to just, you know, ride the storm out if you're concerned about negative PR and change the coaching staff, because ultimately it's not going to show progress. And I think when it goes back to that business point of view, is a progress is Casero's only way he can show progress in a quicker manner than just drafting players and put them in a bad situation. Can you draft players and put them in a better situation? So therefore, is that the best way to show a plan to progress? Because I don't know what the plan is. I've never known. That's my biggest criticism because I don't know what his plan is.
No one
So,
knows.
well, that's it. And I don't think he knows at times because I think there's been so much firefighting going on. I think it's just been keeping the head above water. So, I think they do have to get a new coaching staff to get it credible because you can't run Mills back. I don't think I could watch it again for another year.
It's horrible.
We can't. You can make all the excuses for him. You can say you can build around him, but that would just be so flawed. He's proven he's not good enough. You'd be better bringing Tyrod Taylor back, or somebody, a journeyman and backup type that of that ilk that would help. Now, and people will make excuses for Caserio, they make excuses for Mills, but it's only because your only hope. It's when people, Stockholm syndrome or whatever, people fall in love with their kidnappers, but that's only because that's all they've got, and
And
unfortunately, that's all we've
have
had.
to have accountability.
Well, that's it. Accountability is the big thing, Ruben. I think you're right, and I think we need to find ways in which we get accountable and actually, because that was what Cal said. There's pressure to perform in this organisation. It certainly doesn't look like it, unless you
Doesn't
make
feel
some
like it either.
sweeping changes. But would you accept a situation with a new defensive play caller, a new offensive play caller, and a veteran QB, and just going heavy in the draft? Would that be progress for people enough to not be booing after 3 and out, not for nobody to turn up? Would that be enough this off season?
I mean, to the fans that understand the process, absolutely, for me, that would be enough, right? That shows that you yet are trying to be competitive, but are trying to build, the team around it. We knew, the veteran quarterback that we bring in, we know he's a placeholder, right? The thing about Mills is there was, hope and potential that he could be a long-term starter, and he just hasn't showed that at all this season, right? But if I see a new OC, a new DC, and a veteran QB brought in, I would actually be excited about it. Not sure if the casual fans would, but I actually would.
Yeah.
Not knowing who that veteran QB is, but it shows that they're trying to make a change, right? You obviously get two new coordinators, and that you are demanding a certain level of play from the QB position, because I haven't seen that type of, like I said, I go back to the word accountability at all from this coaching staff or this QB at all. We used to hear Matt Schaub after every pick six say, I played like shit. I need to play better. I need to do this. I need to do that. And you haven't seen that.
Yeah, and I think that I think we'll know at some point this off season if they still keep some of the coaching staff. Then I think that potentially rules out QB because I just can't see them keeping the coaching staff plus a QB because you're just heading for more disaster. And then not only are you not building, you've potentially wasted those picks. But I mean, I suppose that's what's going to make the off season interesting. But it's just a shame that the team's not competitive enough to make the actual season. The whole point you draft, the whole point of it all is to win football games. We're just so far away from that right now, and I think it's tough. But I think if I was to bet on a likely outcome of changing some of the coaching staff, potentially overlooking a QB, ideally trading back, and building the rest of the roster, I think that's the most plausible and most sensible outcome. And I think of a team that's not had any stability, it's potentially your closest option that looks like stability. But certainly, when you're still, but that option potentially puts you in a 4 or 5 win scenario, and then that might put you, having the free pick of any player, which the number one slot, which looks, for all intents and purposes, look like that's going to be the case this year. So it's such a fine balance. There's so many variables, but I hope Caserio can turn it around. I've been desperately want to be convinced by him, but I think right up to this point, I think he deserves just as much criticism as everybody else that's on this rudderless ship at times. Certainly this season, it's looked like that.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, if they're gonna tank for Caleb Williams, and let me know, and I'm all on board right now.
Yeah, and I think he's got a good, an it factor. I think about him when you watch him play. I think Cade Mays from North Carolina. I know he didn't play as well the weekend past there and they lost, but I think there's guys like that in the draft that there's always next year. And I think there's always that kind of the sort of fallacy, isn't it? It was like, oh, the QB class is better next year, but you don't know because you have names and then a year out they play another full season in college and then all of a sudden they disappear. A lot can change. There's names that come out the blue, like Joe Burrow, etc. So there's so many examples of how quickly it could change. So I don't think you can ever evaluate one class on the basis of the next class may or may not give you something. I think you've just got to take it in its entirety. What's the best player for us? And it would be great to get a quarterback that can play because it just would make it worth watching. And you could maybe piece together a squad that you could put around them, and then it's just build after that first season. Because you can have deeply flawed teams like the Bengals last year went all the way to the Super Bowl, on the back of a good quarterback that could play, and they just went empty set and 5 wide and just threw it around, and it was just enough to beat a lot of teams, and it was good to watch, and I think that's the key. You want this to mean something, and it just doesn't mean something. And if you are to go the safe kind of build route, it's probably the right thing to do, but it just sort of potentially, puts a fourth season in a row of a team that's not going to be all that competitive, which is tough to take. And I keep going back to that business viewpoint of how much will ownership accept that, and if they blow up. I said this on Twitter to somebody today, Ruben. Would you be shocked? Not necessarily shocked, but would you shed a tear if Caserio was fired as well this off season? I don't think he will be, but I think he should be. But I don't think this organisation necessarily does what they should do. But if that happened, would you be too concerned?
I mean, I wouldn't be too concerned. Would I be shocked? Absolutely. Because the way he was hired was just absolutely crazy, right? But if he was fired, I wouldn't be shocked. But who is the next guy, and who is going to be in charge of leading the hiring process for that guy, right? Are you going to bring in Andre Johnson?
That's what saves his job, isn't it? Like that is generally what saves his job is the poor ownership in it. And I think if that's the reason what saves his job, not his own job performance, that's where the deep rooted issues are. For the foundations, as Whitney Merciless said when he went to Green Bay, there's problems right up to the tippy top, and I think that probably sums the whole fucking thing up at some point, isn't it? Really, because I think, but yeah, would you, but what do you think he has to do this off season that he hasn't done to give people a sense of hope and progress?
I think first you need to hire a competent head coach, one where we feel like, yes, this guy can give us some wins, right? It wasn't David Culley. It wasn't Lovie Smith. You need to go after a name where the fans would go behind and believe that this guy can potentially put us on the right track to win football games, whether that's D'Amico Ryans, whether it's Jonathan Gannon. But you need to make, I think, the right hire at head coach, and one where fans would understand and be excited for. Right. And then, let's say in free agency, you fix key holes when, with the amount of money that you have, and then just depending on the draft, man. Like I said, I do feel like maybe Nick Casario might be forced to take a quarterback number one overall.
Mm.
And but that's the beauty of having two first round picks. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I think the first thing you got to do is get a head coach that everyone is very excited about, and
Yeah.
just be committed to winning.
My fear is that they're just not in a position to attract a head coach that would do exactly what you're saying, and I think that's my fear, and why I think the build and the overlooking the potential quarterbacks. But I think they haven't drafted for Lovey, so you could potentially keep him around and draft one as a hybrid situation. But I just don't see it. It just wouldn't certainly fill me with potential hope. I think you've got to start it clean as many
You're gonna
times as
have
you
to
need
at
to.
this point, man.
Yeah, and I just don't know if they will, and I genuinely don't, because I know if Lovey was forced upon Nick, then it's not Nick's decision. And when he goes wholly, he can certainly recommend it, like he did last off season. But it just goes back to the point again that you're just waiting for all these games to be done, and then it'll be interesting this off season. But yeah, it's a shame we're talking about this kind of stuff at this stage of the season. But Miami, I assume it's a foregone conclusion. Do you think this could be the first blowout of the season?
Yeah, I think this is the game that is going to end the Davis Mills agenda. You're gonna go into the December 4th Deshaun Watson game 1-9-1. And if you want to give any hope to the fans, you give them what they want. You try to make a change. You start Kyle Allen. And to me, like we said, like right before we recorded this, maybe the most important game for the Houston Texans, a potentially, game changing pick. We own their first round pick. They only have 3 wins on the season. We could
Yeah.
help ourselves a little bit by winning.
I just don't see any way we can beat them with a rushed attack. I think they don't even need to give it to Watson at all. They could just rush the rush the
Well, the
ball on the
crowd's going to
ground.
be a huge factor for that game. If there was any, type of home field advantage, it will be at NRG. And a lot of people, dislike Deshaun, so that place is going to be, to be loud, and I think that is going to be the only driving force for this Houston Texans team.
Yeah, no, potentially. Yeah, I mean, that's probably it's the only game worth watching for now until the end of the season. But yeah, we got Miami this weekend. I think could potentially be a big blowout because of just the way their offense is built, and if they can start running the ball as well as their explosive offense with Hill and Waddle, then I think it's going to be a tough watch. I think for everybody again, and yeah, it's a tough situation to be in. But it is thanks. Well, end on a positive note. It's Thanksgiving this week. Any traditions? Any plans, Ruben?
No, like I'm just gonna get with the fam, eat some ham, eat some turkey, drink a whole lot, and just just enjoy like being around family. Because at the end of the day, friends leave you, co-workers leave you, but family is there for you at the very end of the day. I'm blessed to say I have a good group of friends and family, so I hope you do too as well. And I'm excited, man. I'm excited for the future. Like what are you doing for Thanksgiving?
Yeah, well, it's not really celebrated over here. I had my first one last year, when I was in Houston last year. I stayed with my friends. His name's Ruben also. Shout out to them and their family. We did both sides of the family, so we had 2 Thanksgiving meals and everything last year, and then we watched the football, and like the Cowboys got beat from the Raiders last year when we were sitting watching that. So yeah, it's a good day. I certainly appreciate it. Probably watch some games. I don't know if there'll be a podcast next week because I'm actually getting 2 teeth taken out this week. So at the dentist, so I may or may not be able to speak next week. I think that could be a good thing, and it could arguably be as painful as watching the Texans on a Sunday. So yeah, we'll see if we're back this week. But I'll certainly be sitting recovering on the couch. Definitely watch some Thanksgiving football, a couple of decent games. So yeah, no, have a good one, man. Have a good one with the family, and
Absolutely.
I suppose you could talk about the future. The future is the only thing that keeps you going because it's definitely, or certainly, there's a hope that is different from the here and now, and the here and now is not good enough. It's not good enough for this city. It's not good enough for these fans. They deserve a hell of a lot better. But I think Nick's got this off season to turn it around. I think there's got to be a lot more questions than he's had to this point. Changes will have to happen if things are going to improve, but certainly I can't see it improving this week. I did have a slight feeling, Ruben, I don't know if you saw Lovey's press conference earlier, his Monday morning one. I kind of got this slight hint. I didn't see anybody reporting that way that there might be a little change. So we might see Kyle Allen, we might not. I don't know. I hope there's some form of change this week because there's only so many times you can defend the indefensible, I think. And I think that's the trouble for Lovey. I think he's kind of in a place where he kind of sounds like he's not wholly in tune with everything he needs to be. And I think that's potentially what could undermine him as a head coach and potentially see his departure.
Yeah, no, let's say Kyle Allen goes into Miami, gets the start. Maybe we still lose, but if offense looks a little bit competitive, right? Because obviously it is a change. People are going to block better. People are going to run their routes better. It's going to be, kind of interesting going into December 4th with NRG. But like I said, nonetheless, I am expecting a loss from one of the best well-coached teams in the NFL. But a change is needed. It was definitely needed during the Washington Commanders game. When you were at -1 passing yard, I thought the change was going to be at half. I thought that would have been a good spot to put him in, see how he does well with his offense. Maybe make this game a little bit interesting and you work for Miami. But, I would say now make the change. Name Kyle Allen your starting quarterback. And, everyone's very excited to come into NRG with the new starting quarterback and a chance to make Deshaun Watson's day horrible.
Yeah, well, I think that's the game that we'll be back for, and hopefully it'll be a good crowd. Hopefully, people can use the venom or whatever you want to call it from the stands to get a good performance. In the next couple of weeks because it's going to be tough sledding. But hopefully, changes afoot. Might be some small ones now. You might see Benjamin. You might see Amari Rogers. You might just see some small things. Sting might be back. Green might pull it together. Petrie might learn how to tackle with his arms and not drop clear interceptions. Small things. I don't think we're asking for much right now.
Yeah, no, we're not asking for much. Just play competent football, man. Just look like you want to be there. Make the game a little bit interesting. Give us a reason to cheer. And let's see where we go from here. Yeah. There is nowhere to look but up for this Houston Texans franchise. So hopefully it starts as soon as December 4th. And we get this season done with it, start looking towards off-season and the draft.
Yeah. Even if you're going to lose, do it with a bit of pride, a bit of dignity. And hopefully,
you're going to lose, do it in fashion. Make it look sexy.
Yeah, give it something that you can at least take some positives to build upon. There isn't many right now, but if you are still listening after one of the worst games I've watched, not for the first time this season, then thank you very much for listening to this week's edition of the Turn Up For What podcast. Have a great Thanksgiving when it comes to you, if you've had it already or you're on your way to meet your loved ones. Have a good one. Don't let this team ruin your life too much because they don't deserve you.